We're in the first Psalm, and I want to pick it up where I left off last time. So I didn't get us out of verse 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. So you got three categories of people here: the wicked, the sinner, and the mocker. The wicked, I've talked about this. That's a very subjective thing for us today, but for a committed Hebrew to whom this was written, and by whom it was written, the wicked this was not a subjective, opinionated idea. It was, when you break with God's design, and not by simple omission or misunderstanding, but by intent, that makes you wicked. In our world, if you don't agree with me, that makes you wicked. That's not what the writer of this psalm had in mind. It was those who think, intend, and act in opposition to God's laws, His will, His ways, His design. Okay. There will never not be wicked people until Jesus returns, time ends, and either we're translated into heaven or we're doomed into hell. So they're always going to be with us until then. And then he talks about the mocker. There are lots of different ways that mocking happens, and I don't think this verse, this phrase, makes a lot of comedy. Comedy is mocking, and that's one of the things that makes it funny, right? When I mock myself or someone else in a humorous, it can be done in a very destructive way, and it can be done in a soft and lighthearted way. Well, when I was younger, in my 20s and even into my 30s, I was kind of, I was a legend in my own mind when it came to cold cuts, meaning sarcastic remarks. Sarcasm, I'm not going to say sarcasm as a sin, because I don't necessarily think it is. I do think, though, when my intent is to denigrate someone, when my intent is to reduce the dignity or the value of someone else, if that's not a sin, it's dancing on the razor thin edge. Here, though, I think this is a reference to something that Paul wrote about in the New Testament many hundreds of years later, where he wrote, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." He goes on to say, if you sow to the flesh, from the flesh you will reap corruption. But if you sow to the Spirit, from the Spirit you will reap life. God cannot be mocked. Really? I'm looking around the world, and I have to admit to you that my view, the horizon of the world, is pretty small. but it's way bigger than generations previous to me had, for the most part. It's a bad thing, and could potentially not be totally all bad, but I get most of my news or alerts to what's happening in the world from social media. I don't really trust the news outlets. And the truth is, social media is no more reliable. I just try to listen to sources that I have, the few sources that I have trust in. When I do that, it seems like to me, that very much of our secular world is mocking God. Right? I'm not doing this politically. I'm doing it on the, I know this is awful to say, for some people it's going to sound offensive, but I won't apologize for it. The gender confusion stuff that, well, I'm a male locked in a female body, or a female locked in a male body, and I want, folks, in my opinion, it's a mockery of God's design. I mean, through the writer of Genesis, he makes it really clear. Male and female, he created them. He didn't create 86 different genders. Now, do I feel harsh toward people who genuinely are conflicted about certain of their internal desires? Well, no, but I do have a very, very harsh criticism of people who lead. Most of the people having this kind of trouble are young people, and many of them are grade school kids. That's just wicked. That's a sin, in my opinion. It's a mockery of God. Okay, I don't know that I'm going to be able to fix that. But if Paul is right, and I believe he is, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is he was inspired by the Holy Spirit, okay? God doesn't make mistakes. God, he said, cannot be mocked. You might try. And people, let's think about this. People have been trying to mock God probably since the third generation of Adam and Eve's beginnings. They may have not thought, well, I will mock God, or I'll flip him off, or whatever. But not honoring, observing, pushing against his design is a form of mockery. So it's happened forever. I think about Noah's day. The mockery of God was so bad that God regretted that he had ever made man. Wow. Now, without getting into the deep philosophical sides of how can God have regret, that's a whole different deal. Okay, but what I'm talking about is a world of people who, by their choices and by their behaviors, their attitudes, their chosen views of life, mock God. We live in a world, I don't think it's quite, it's not yet like Noah's day, but it has become, in our American culture, it has become more, there are more mockings of God in more ways than probably there have ever been. More people, more individuals, and much of this is happening among people with power and authority, not just governments, but in academia, in judicial, when anyone makes an attempt to mock God, it's a futile attempt because God cannot be mocked. And here's my opinion of why. Because God wins. Period. It may be that temporarily the one who mocks God blatantly, or even whose life and choices and views of life are a mockery of God's design, who are not quite so virulent or so violent about it, it may temporarily, they may seem, leading atheists today I feel that they have thumped those God-fearing Christians. Well, you know this. It's worth not losing track of. There will be a day. There will be a day, a moment, when God wins. I don't care how this atheist felt the debate went. All I know is there is a debate that they will not win. And that's when they stand before God on the day of judgment. I have a tendency to want God to nail them. I want him to lay it on and smack them, break their nose, break their teeth, right? What I wish my heart would be most, what's the word I want to use, most passionate about, is that they would meet Jesus and replace the lens of their own self-sufficiency and their own humanism and whatever else keeps them from seeing God for who he is and themselves for who they are, that they would come to Jesus. Well, mockers, here's the thing about the wicked and sinners and mockers. When you hang out with these people, you have to be very, very careful and very vigilant, as well as courageous and strong, or else you will become like them. There's an old thing that says, the 5 people that you hang out most with, that you spend the most time with, will determine who you are, because you're likely to become like the people you most hang out with. Now, Jesus was a friend of sinners and tax collectors. He hung out with them, but he never became like them. All right, so the wicked and sinners and mockers are, I used to think they're my enemy. Well, no, they're not my enemy. They are hostages, victims of my enemy, because the devil's my enemy. And the big thing I don't want is to become like them. But if I ever want to have influence in their lives toward the grace and love of God and the lordship of Jesus, I've got to connect and on some level with these people. It's a conundrum. But I think the point of what the psalmist writes here is, if you want to be truly blessed, fulfilled, happy but not the surface happiness, you cannot become like these 3 kinds of people: the wicked, the sinner, and the mocker. So when you are with them, don't become like them. Okay. I think I beat that horse. So I'll pick it up there next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.